Have you ever thought to yourself, man, World of Warcraft is a cool universe. I wish I could build a zone in it. Well, this is gonna be the video for you. Whether you are on Epsilon, Noble Garden, Dragonflight, BFA, Shadowlands, the new classic builds, using custom launchers or other tools that would let you add files to the game, this step-by-step guide should get you started. I should also preface this by saying this is for local sandboxes and private servers only. The goal of this video is to set up a rapid and seamless workflow, where instead of fiddling with various tools and converters, you can just focus on making maps. There are chapters available below for some of the distinct topics that we will be discussing, but for now, let's start with the setup. Even though we will be making maps for new clients, Noggit, the community map editor, sadly works only with the old Wrath client currently. So the first thing we need is a 335A US client. Has to be that exact build. As long as the client is stock, it shouldn't matter where you download it, but generally WowDL.net, Chromicraft, Warmain, etc. all should be fine. Next, we're going to need modern assets, downported to Wrath. Links will be in our Discord. After that, we need to get a particular version of Noggit, one that supports modern features. Navigate to releases and grab the latest build. Another thing we need here is the converter. Note that you might need to install .NET to run C# programs and the latest VC++ redistributable for Noggit. After you have everything downloaded, place the downported assets into the data folder of your Wrath client, together with the other MPQ files. After this, let's start Noggit. Hit Create New Project and fill in the directories, the path to your Wrath folder, path to where your files will be saved, and the name. Double-click the project that you have just made, and next is setting up a template map. This is supposed to be the simplest, most pain-free way to start editing. I highly recommend starting with this as you learn, because it will solve a lot of issues. Hit Create New Map, and in Map directory put Custom Map as one word. And here you can put pretty much any cosmetic name that you want, and save. Let's close Noggit for now, and get the files for the template map. Template maps will likely be expanded upon, and will be hosted in our Discord. Go into the Mega, download the two archives in the Listfile, and extract them. Custom Map 335 goes into your project folder. It should be your project folder, World, Maps, Custom Map, and replace empty files that we have created. Custom Map Modern goes into your Modern client with whatever mapping file it is using to load files. This particular one is an Epsilon patch, and that needs to be enabled in the launcher. Custom list file goes into your UpConverter meta folder. If it's not there yet, just create it. Go back, and now let's do the converter setup. When you first open the GUI, you will need to download the necessary config files. Hit those 4 buttons, and let's fill in the paths here. Input directory is your project folder, where the map that you will be editing is. In our case, it is your project folder, World, Maps, Custom Map that we have created. Output directory is from where your game will be reading modern map files from. Since I'm on Epsilon, it's my patch for this particular map. I should also note that Arctium mapping support is also planned, as well as more generic folder patches. The last thing to do is to grab the texture config for Noggit. It also can be found in releases. Navigate to your project folder and make a new folder there. Call it lowercase extra uppercase data as one word, and paste it there. Now we're finally done with the setup and can start editing. Of course you can edit other maps, but that has more variables and will be covered in the advanced section. With template maps, on the other hand, the only potential failure point might be from extreme user error. When you first open a map in Noggit, it will prompt you to get a UID check. Hit Get Max UID. I would also suggest going Help Keybinds for general information on how the tools work. Also in Settings, double check that the Modern Features is enabled. The movement in Noggit is pretty standard. It's WASD. O can decrease your movement speed and P can increase it. Let's go over the left panel first. If you mouse over any icon, it should display what tool you're looking at. The first one is raise and lower. On the right you can control the type, speed, radius, object behavior, and there's also a custom brush to load height map based brushes. You use Shift left click to raise and Control left click to lower. The second tool is the smoothing tool, used to smooth out heights and get the angles you need out of the terrain. The third one is the texturing tool. A thing of interest here is the height texturing and texture scaling functionality, where with height texturing you can basically paint a texture in the low points of another one. When doing texturing, try to pick tile sets that fit together well in terms of their color palette. Also, a good idea here is to always start with a base, of usually dirt, and paint other textures on top of it, though do mind that each chunk has a 4 texture limit. It might be overwhelming at first, but with just a bit of practice and looking at how Blizzard do zones, it should get a lot easier. There are also a few essentials, like wireframe here, vertex coloring, and much more. We will touch on some of that stuff a bit later while looking at Blizzard maps. The next tool is a hole cutter. Holding Control and left click will cut a hole in terrain, letting you place a cave object there, or doing floating islands. Shift left click returns them to normal. The next tool is the area designator. With the way it is now, we will have to talk about it in the advanced section. After this is the impasse tool. It basically closes off chunks from player movement, like an invisible wall. The water tool is pretty self-explanatory. The only thing to note here is the lock. You almost always want to lock water levels for smooth surfaces. Up next is a big one, vertex color. Honestly, I'm not good enough to try and explain this one, but basically you have the ability to paint color onto textures. You want to think where would light hit certain rocks and lighten that. Darken texture transitions, add greens and yellows to patches of grass. Have a campfire, the area around it probably has soot in it, and you would want to paint a bit of black. A lit torch emits light, paint some orange there, etc. One major thing I forgot to mention while talking about the texturing tool are what's called ground effects, or detail doodads, or ground clutter. These tiny grasses that get assigned to textures based on texture weights in a texture map. Sometimes those weight differences are inconclusive, and you might want to go into the ground effect tools and paint exclusion, so they don't get generated there. Up next is the object tool. Breaks down into 2 parts, the asset browser and object control. When adding objects to a map, if they are post Battle for Azeroth, only add them if they are not in a placeholder folder. So, World WMO Expansion 09 is fine, World WMO Autogen Names is not. A very important point is, don't place objects that are not in your client, or if you don't know how to add those objects. Terrain files are basically just heights, texture data, vertex color data, and object position data. So if your client doesn't have the objects, it won't load them. The minimap tool. After selecting the lighting you want, you can create a minimap for your zone. Though you might need to delete and regenerate the modern WDT for that to work. The only tool of note that is left is the stamp tool. It's a bit advanced, but if you can set it up correctly, it can give great results, basically letting you stamp fully textured mountains. The panel up top controls rendering of certain things, like M2s, WMOs, chunk borders, wireframe, vertex color, shadows, and so on and so forth. Now let's talk about level design. Proper planning and starting small are key here. Let's take a bit of time to look at how Blizzard makes zones. This is a BFA level design map showcasing their techniques and processes. As you can see, this is a rough layout, blockouts of zones and towns, but you can already understand the feel of the zone and how it will flow. Next, they do a rough texture pass and start detailing with objects. After this, everything is refined, vertex colors are finalized, detailing is done, etc. Other points that we should briefly note are texture brains and object clusters. Object clusters are pretty self-explanatory. Instead of placing one object at a time, it's easier to do several groups of objects that fit together well, and position those around your map. Texture Brain breaks down the monotony of single textures by introducing patterns of cracks or low points for the terrain. If you want to learn more about Blizzard's level design, I would recommend looking at BlizzCon panels and also at artists' art stations. Probably the hardest skill to master for a beginner is making mountains and rocks. For that, I would recommend looking at two zones, the river zone in Kultiras and the Stormsong Valley. If you want to know how to do that, please stick around until the advanced section, when we will be talking about editing continents. Going back to our map, whenever you will want to see it in game, just turn on the converter and save the map. At first I would recommend always saying the full map and then only the change tiles. Whenever the map is saved and converted, you would want to teleport there. Use whatever command your server is using. The map ID for this template zone is 1925. Assign skyboxes if you have the tools that can do that, or just use auras. In general, a good piece of advice for Noggit is to save often, and another one would be to check your zone in-game to see if the things are framed correctly and feel right. Now let's start the advanced section. First, let's talk about the list file. It's probably the most important thing when it comes to modern versus old map making. Old clients are running on file name references, and new ones use file data ID. Listfile is basically a ledger of file names and their file data IDs. If an object you are placing is not in the list file, the converter won't know what to place. And that works the other way around if you're downporting things, so keep that in mind. Area names. In an ideal world, we would be able to choose an ID that is created with Noggit, but currently that's not a feature. First thing you need to do is go to wago.tools or all.wow.tools and open the area table. Find the ID of an area that you want to paint and save it somewhere. Open the area tool in Noggit and create a new entry. The name here doesn't matter since it's basically a placeholder, but save it and close Noggit. After this, navigate to your project folder, DB Files Client, and open the DBC file there. To do that, you will need WDBX Editor. You can find it in the resources on the Mega, like all the other tools for the advanced section. Find the entry below and change the ID manually to whatever you saved. And after this, you should be able to paint it normally in Noggit. Now let's talk about continent editing. If you want to edit continents, and that includes Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, You'll need to get the patches for them from resources. On Mega, there are names of continents and their directories. Just like with the template map, you have to add a new one with the proper internal map name, the directory. So, for example, for Pandaria, it's Hawaii mainland, and yes, that's real. After that, clear the empty files that Noggit made, and paste the MPQs into the data folder of your Wrath client. 3 things here. Only do it if necessary, convert only the small things you edit with WDT and WDL generation off, and be ready to fix a lot of data loss. The process of downporting maps removes a lot of tech, and we did try to mitigate what we could, but there are limits to it. But what if you want a different map? For example, the new Arathi Basin, or the Crestfall Island? Well, you will have to downport it yourself. Here's how. Download the tools in the Mega, the ones that are called ensure file names in multi-converter, and you will also need WoW.export. In WoW.export, find the map that you need and export it fully. After the export is done, take the main WDT file and the ADTs and place them in some folder. After this, you want to extract the tools that you downloaded from Mega. There should be a text file called how to use. Double-click that and double-check the instructions. You want to open CMD and paste the command. The command should basically consist of a few paths. The first one is the path to the tool, the second one is the path to the list file for this tool, up next is the output folder, and after this is the input folder. It's important that you add *ADT at the end. That will tell the tool to convert all the files ending in .adt, and that's what we need. This step will translate the file data IDs that we have talked about in the list file section into file names. Now we can open multi-converter and place the main WDT and the converted ADT files there and hit convert. Then comes the already familiar part of adding a new map. Put in the proper directory, the proper cosmetic name, save, close Noggit, place files in your project folder, and voila. Noggit versus Noggit Red. Why are there 2 different Noggits, you ask? Well, it's a sad story. Look at it as different tools for different jobs, and one day they will be united, I believe. Noggit has 2 features that are very powerful, the chunk mover and scripts. Scripts have a lot of functionality, like hide noise, clearing certain objects, replacing other objects, or placing them through an algorithm, etc. The chunk manipulation tool does what it says. Have brain patterns that you want to fill your map with? Sure thing. Modular mountains? Yeah, done. Copy, rotate, raise, lower mountains? Yes. Blizzard use it all the time. If you know, you know. Also, there is an eraser tool for when you really screwed up. You can use the 2 Noggits interchangeably with the same project folder. Moving maps. Let's say you want to move some objects from one map to another. Create a tile on the source map and paste whatever you want there, like this kit bashed Bowser model? Blizzard? Go into your project folder and find the map. Rename the ADT chunk that you created and paste it into your main map folder. After this, open the main WDT for that map with GrulMe. Go second page, scan dir, save. WDT files are like lists that tell the game which tiles are there and how to load them. Whenever you are done, rename the tile and adjust the WDT back. If you need more tiles, you might want to download bulk rename utility. The last 2 points I will only touch on very briefly, because I don't really understand them myself. Generated terrain and custom WMO upporting. Noggit Red has a feature to import height maps, alpha maps and vertex maps from tools like Gaia. You will need to find the guides for that in the modding Discord, but if you want it, there is a way. The Wrath client being old is a blessing and a curse. Everything is stuck in 2009, but hey, there are at least a lot of tools available. One such tool is WoW Blender Studio. Through it, you can make World of Warcraft WMOs that you can then upport with the attached tool. Remember our discussion about list files though. Every custom BLP texture and WMO part needs to have proper file data ID references. Bounding boxes have to be added in the blob file in the converter's meta folder. But other than that, it is as simple as opening Blender, closing your eyes, focusing on the cube and manifesting a beautiful object. Oh, it's an elven gazebo in this case. Nice. When you can export a proper WMO with the add-on and have all the list file entries for the converter there, place it into input and convert. Add them both to the Wrath files and the modern files, and you're good to go. The only limit with WoW Blender Studio is your own knowledge with Blender, but if that is developed, you can make pretty much anything. Remaster dungeons, make custom assets, or upport old assets. And that should conclude our rather bare-bones guide. There will be a written guide attached to this, and that you can find in our Discord. A massive thank you to Marleman for writing the converter and combining the work of so many awesome Noggit developers. Thank you to Varen for releasing his modern texturing implementation, Lazifix for his work on the Warcraft.net lib. Thank you to Binary Space and other Kuritar developers for making their ADT and WMO converter and inspiring this project. Azartius for the Epsilon integration. Thank you to Grimrun from Caverns of Time for their RP map. Elnir, Intra and Keki for letting me upport their awesome custom WMOs. 50-50 for the Gaia map. And thank you for watching. Learn, improve, share the knowledge, and show off the cool stuff that you will be building. And I'll see you later.